Stephen Hawking died earlier this week, and the scientific community is mourning the loss of a powerful and gifted brain. In my previous video, we discussed the fact that the human brain is the most complex thing in the observable universe, and I challenged you to ponder who in history do you think had the most complex brain, and would this boil down to intelligence or some other facet? It is only appropriate in the wake of this loss that this week we are discussing matters of neural complexity and intelligence. So who is it? Who had the most complex brain in all of human history? Who among us stood out above the rest to have the most intricate thing in the known universe? Let's assume that it does come down to a matter of intelligence, since it is our human-level intellect that sets us apart from animals and is a direct result of our increased complexity over theirs. We can start this conversation by discussing what exactly intelligence is. If you zip over to Wikipedia, you're going to see the definition: the ability to perceive or infer information and to retain it as knowledge to be applied towards adaptive behaviors within an environment or context. And I actually think that that's a pretty good way to put it. A simpler definition, something that one of my psychology professors once said, is that intelligence, or aptitude, is the ease with which you get your A's. It isn't a matter of hard work or even knowledge retention. Someone who is less intelligent than someone else can still know more than them because they've put more time or effort into learning. Intelligence is measured by one's intelligence quotient, or IQ. An IQ can be measured through a test that essentially rates you compared to everyone else who has taken that test. This is what is called standardization. There are other forms of tests such as the SAT, ACT, MCAT, standardized tests, but are specialized towards academic information. Sometimes a subfield within academics, such as the MCAT, focusing on medicine. A general IQ test, however, measures your overall ability to perceive information, process it, and then apply it. Neurologically, intelligence is a vast phenomenon spanning almost every area of the brain in some facet, from the orbitofrontal cortex, which is an important relaying point for information, to the hippocampus, which is responsible for long-term memory formation and has implications in problem solving, to even the cerebellum, which we usually think of as just being responsible for balance and motor control, but is in fact the seat of agility in the brain, and that includes mental agility too. So it has a role in your intelligence as well. So if intelligence is the ease with which you get your A's, it means that your brain is able to do things more efficiently than other people's brains. This means it requires less energy to transfer the same amount of information. How can this be? I explained last time about entropy and the fact that there is no way to beat it. You must always pay the cosmic piper. But for people with sufficiently complicated brains, they are able to accomplish tasks more efficiently because more energy has gone into creating the very complexity in their brains that gives them their intelligence. So the cosmic piper is paid. Entropy still holds true. Hawking is famously quoted as having said,
"People who boast about their IQ are losers."
Yeah, that's easy for him to say, considering that this is someone whose former physics tutor once described as such. It was only necessary for him to know that something could be done, and he could do it without looking to see how other people did it. That is the very measure of intelligence. Stephen Hawking was able to approach difficult and complex situations and handle them easier than other people. But who could be more intelligent than Stephen Hawking? Perhaps it would be someone from a past time who had fewer resources, but yet was still able to come up with great things. Someone like Nikola Tesla, whose obsession with electricity was so great that he was able to draw it out of the Earth's magnetic field while most people were still riding around in horse and carriage. But then you had Einstein, who came along and had theories that were the stuff of Tesla's nightmares. Kim Peek seems like a good candidate. A man born without a corpus callosum who, for some reason, was able to read books 2 pages at a time and could memorize their entire contents. Except that Kim Peek wasn't actually very good at processing information. This was in fact a source of a lot of struggle in the man's life. He could memorize vast amounts of information, but he couldn't really apply them to anything or learn from them to change his behavior later on. And that is the measure of intelligence. So you could think of someone like Kim Peek or people with savantic autism as powerful hard drives connected to average or below average processors. They can store the data, but they can't really do much more with it than the average person, and in many cases, they can do far less with it. Could it be someone from the ancient world, some philosopher who was way ahead of their time, like Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, or even some unknown individual just trudging along through life but perceiving the world so much different than those around them? Someone like Petrarch, an Italian poet and Renaissance man who unfortunately came a full 100 years too early for the actual Renaissance, and was forced to live out his entire life surrounded by people who seemed much dimmer than him in what he coined the Dark Ages. Well, unfortunately, if the most complex brain in human history happened in ancient times, we're not going to be able to prove it today, even if they were someone famous. So let's go with what we know here and now. Who would have been the most intelligent, complex, and entropy-sidestepping brain in history? Well, I hate to spoil this for you, but we don't really know, and we never could know. So why don't instead we examine one of the people who it could have been, and you decide for yourself. William James Sidis. He could read the New York Times by the age of 2. By the age of 6, he understood 8 languages, and within a few more years would develop his own, called Vendergood. And then he was accepted to Harvard University at the age of 11, though really he would have been accepted at 9 based on his grades and his intellect. They just had concerns about letting someone so young in. He had good genetics, he was the child of a psychologist and a doctor, and perhaps most interestingly, William James Sidis, though a prodigy, was a prodigy at multiple things, which is unusual, so we can rule out some form of savantic autism as causing this situation. Oddly enough, he only graduated cum laude from Harvard. It seems like he could have done a little bit better if he had tried. Unfortunately for us, William James Sidis spurned public attention, and to complicate matters further, his biographer and his sister were often known to exaggerate his intelligent qualities, making claims like he could speak every language in the world, or that he maxed out the scores on a number of intelligence tests. So, a lot of where we get our information from about this man may have been exaggerated. This isn't to say that he wasn't intelligent. It is well documented. The things about the language, him being a math prodigy as a small child, we just can't know exactly how intelligent he was. Unfortunately, even with IQ tests, we do not have any exact metric to determine complexity of the brain between two different people, because different people may show high complexity or aptitude for different skills. Now, for any psychologists out there who might be listening and screaming, but what about G? Yes, there is that. G is a variable name given to the concept that as one skill level or form of intelligence rises, all the rest tend to rise on average as well. But even still, the reasons for this are poorly understood, and certainly so when we are looking back in history to try to determine who the smartest of us ever was. So what do you think? Who's your candidate for smartest person in history? Leave me a comment below to let me know. Also, if anyone can look up information about that cum laude business, please tell me. Was it something like maybe Harvard didn't have higher levels than cum laude at that time? So go out there, learn, and most importantly, thanks for watching.